Nobody saw this coming. Not Iran, not the IRGC commanders who've spent months believing they control the most important waterway on Earth. Not the Gulf states who've been watching their oil revenues collapse day by day. Not even the United States, which has been running its own blockade of Iranian ports while trying to figure out how to reopen the straits, simultaneously trying to lock down. Nobody predicted that the country that would change the equation in the Strait of Hormuz would be Ukraine. Think about that for 1 second. Ukraine, a country that has been fighting for its own survival for over 4 years. A country that was on the receiving end of Russian drone attacks, missile strikes, and a naval blockade of its own Black Sea coastline. A country that in February 2022 was considered by most military analysts to be weeks away from falling. That country just signed decade-long defense deals with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. That country already has over 200 of its drone experts operating in the Gulf region right now, today, directly intercepting Iranian Shahed drones that are targeting Gulf infrastructure. And that country's president just dropped a hint at an international security summit that stopped every intelligence analyst in the room cold. Zelenskyy said the sea drones are coming. Ukraine's naval drones, the same systems that destroyed a third of Russia's Black Sea fleet, that forced Russian warships to retreat from Crimea, that disabled a Russian submarine that hit the Kerch Bridge. Those drones are heading to the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran, which has built its entire strait strategy around fast boats and shahads, and the assumption that no adversary in that waterway has the capability to counter asymmetric naval warfare, has no answer for what's coming. Here's exactly what Ukraine just did. Here's what the Magura drone actually is and what it can do. Here's why Iran's commanders are worried in ways they weren't last week. And here's why this move changes the Strait of Hormuz equation more than anything else that's happened since Operation Epic Fury began. Stay with me. This one nobody expected. Let's start with the words, because the words were chosen carefully and they mean exactly what they say. At an online security summit held in advance of a major follow-up conference that the UK is hosting in London, a conference involving 35 nations focused on how the collective West restores freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. Zelenskyy said this: "Also, if we have our drone deal with Middle Eastern countries, our sea drones are included in it. Therefore, anything can appear. We can join in on defense. We can help with convoys. Anything can appear." That phrase from a president who has learned to communicate strategic information through careful hints rather than announced declarations is not casual language. When Zelenskyy says anything can appear in the Strait of Hormuz, he means Ukraine's full naval drone capability is now potentially deployable in the world's most strategically important waterway. And he said this at a summit convened specifically to discuss Hormuz security in front of delegates from 35 nations, with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer having already described restoring strait navigation as a global responsibility. Starmer has also specifically said that Ukraine could play a useful role in reopening the strait. The UK knows what's coming. The Gulf states know. The 35 nations at that summit know. Iran does not yet know the full picture, but it will. And the moment Ukraine's naval drones appear in the Strait of Hormuz, the operational environment that Iran's IRGC Navy has been dominating with fast boats and shahads transforms into something those IRGC commanders have never trained to fight. Here's the story that most Western media has missed completely. Ukraine's transformation from a country fighting for survival to a country capable of projecting military capability into the Gulf region didn't happen overnight. And it wasn't accidental. It was engineered. 4 years of existential conflict against Russia's military, facing Russian drones, Russian missiles, Russian naval blockades, Russian electronic warfare, produced something that no defense procurement budget could have produced deliberately: combat-tested innovation at speed. Ukraine's drone program went from domestically produced FPV drones used for frontline operations to a world-leading suite of naval, aerial, and interceptor platforms that have defeated some of Russia's most advanced military technology. The naval drone, specifically the platform that is now heading to the Gulf, was born from necessity. Ukraine needed to break Russia's Black Sea blockade. It didn't have the naval surface forces to confront Russian warships directly. It didn't have submarines. It didn't have the air power to consistently strike naval targets. So it built something Russia didn't have a plan for. Unmanned surface vessels, autonomous, difficult to detect, carrying enough explosive payload to sink a warship operating in swarms, coordinated by a targeting network that gave Ukraine a picture of Russian naval positions that the Russians couldn't conceal. The result? A third of Russia's Black Sea fleet destroyed by March 2024. Russian warships retreating from Crimea to Novorossiysk. Russia's naval presence in the Black Sea, once a dominant strategic asset, reduced to a force that rarely leaves port because it knows what's waiting. That blueprint, that combat-proven, operationally refined, real-world tested blueprint, is what Zelenskyy just told the Gulf states they're getting. Let's talk about the specific system that is about to change the Strait of Hormuz, the Magura V5. This is not a prototype, not a concept demonstrator, not a system being rushed into production in response to the Gulf crisis. The Magura V5 has been operational since 2025. It has combat history, and its capabilities have just been publicly validated in a way that should make every IRGC naval commander deeply uncomfortable. The specifications: first cruising speed 23 knots, top speed 39 knots, 39 knots. That is faster than most of the IRGC fast boats currently operating in the Strait of Hormuz. The weapon designed to threaten shipping can be outrun by the drone designed to stop it. Endurance: 48 hours at sea continuously. Range: 800 nautical miles. The Strait of Hormuz is 100 miles long. A Magura operating from a Gulf state port can cover the entire length of the strait multiple times over on a single deployment. Payload: 650 kilograms, over 1,400 pounds. That is not a small warhead. That is enough explosive payload to obliterate an IRGC fast boat to severely damage a larger Iranian naval vessel. And as NATO war games have now confirmed, enough to simulate the sinking of a NATO frigate. Here's that story. And it's the detail that changes the entire picture. In September 2025, during NATO's REPMIS and Dynamic Messenger exercises off the coast of Portugal, a war game was conducted with NATO forces as blues and Ukraine's Magura V5 drones as reds. 5 scenarios, 5 separate tactical situations. The reds defeated the blues in all 5. In the most significant engagement, a Magura locked onto the radar system of a NATO frigate without being detected. Under the war games rules, that counted as a simulated sinking. A Ukrainian unmanned surface vessel operating against NATO warships with NATO crews fully alert to the threat and specifically trying to defeat it. Won repeatedly. Iran's fast boats are not NATO frigates. They are smaller, less sophisticated, and operating in a waterway where the Magura's range and endurance give it a persistent presence that the IRGC's manned vessels cannot sustain. Now, here's the capability that nobody was expecting. On April 19th, just days before Zelensky's summit hints, Military reported on a world-first operational achievement. Ukraine used a naval drone as a mothership to intercept an aerial drone. Let that sink in for a moment. Ukraine launched an interceptor drone from the deck of a naval drone at sea in an active operational environment against a Shahed-type drone that was operating as a real threat. The interceptor launched from the naval drone's deck, climbed into the threat's airspace, achieved a lock on the target, scored a direct hit. A drone launched from a drone at sea. First time in history, operational success. This achievement documented, filmed, released, is not just a technology demonstration. It is the direct answer to the most specific challenge of the Strait of Hormuz environment. Here's the problem Ukraine just solved. Ukraine's interceptor drones, the systems already deployed in the Gulf region and already shooting down Iranian shaheds, work best when defending fixed, static targets. The infrastructure, the ports, the facilities that don't move. Commercial shipping isn't static. It's moving through the strait at all hours. An IRGC Shahed targeting a tanker doesn't give that tanker time to request interceptor support from shore. The tanker needs protection that moves with it. A Magura V5 equipped with interceptor drones sailing alongside a commercial convoy through the strait provides exactly that. The shahed appears. The Mura launches its interceptor. The interceptor takes down the shahed. The tanker keeps moving. And if an IRGC fast boat attempts to engage the convoy while the Mura is dealing with the aerial threat, the Mura has a machine gun variant for exactly that scenario, or the 650-kilogram warhead if the situation calls for something more decisive. One platform, multiple threat responses proven in combat against Russia's military technology. Now let's talk about the framework that makes all of this possible. Because Ukraine's drones don't appear in the Strait of Hormuz by accident. They appear because of a diplomatic and strategic architecture that Zelenskyy has been building for months. On April 19th, Ukraine officially signed decadal-long defense agreements with 3 nations: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar. 10-year contracts, not letters of intent, not memorandums of understanding, signed agreements committing both parties to sustained defense cooperation for a decade. And beyond those 3, Zelenskyy announced that Ukraine has received requests from 11 additional countries in the Middle East and Gulf region, is beginning to look toward the Caucasus. Ukraine, in the middle of its own existential war, is building a defense export and cooperation architecture that rivals what established NATO powers have built over decades. The substance of these deals is not just Ukrainian drones flowing to the Gulf. It's a genuine two-way partnership. The Gulf states are providing Ukraine with oil, crude being delivered to European refineries to be converted into fuel for Ukrainian military and civilian use. In some cases, diesel provided directly, financial assistance, missile interceptors from countries that have the resources and the specific assets that Ukraine needs. And Zelenskyy specifically called this out. Ukraine is not being treated as a charity case by the Gulf states. It's being treated as an equal partner, getting as good as it gives. That equality, that mutual recognition that Ukraine has something genuinely valuable to offer, is the strategic transformation that 4 years of innovation under existential pressure produced. Ukraine entered 2022 as a recipient of military assistance. It enters 2026 as a provider. Here's why Iran, specifically in the specific operational environment of the Strait of Hormuz, has no good answer for what's coming. Iran's Strait strategy has 3 pillars. Pillar 1, shahed drone attacks on commercial shipping. Swarms of relatively cheap, relatively slow, but difficult to intercept drones that can approach a tanker from multiple angles simultaneously and overwhelm point defense. The Mura with interceptors breaks this pillar. Mobile, sea-based, capable of launching interceptors from the waterway itself against aerial targets approaching any vector. Pillar 2, IRGC fast boat operations. The swarm approach. Multiple high-speed small craft converging on a target simultaneously, forcing the defending vessel to engage multiple threats at once. The Mura breaks this pillar too. At 39 knots, it matches or exceeds the speed of most IRGC fast boats. With its machine gun variant and its explosive payload option, it engages fast boats on their own terms, or eliminates them before they close to engagement range. Pillar 3, the submarine threat. Iran's fleet of 28 to 30 submarines, the capability to mine the strait to threaten surface vessels from below, to operate in a domain where the IRGC's surface and aerial assets are not vulnerable. Ukraine's naval drones have demonstrated in actual operations in the Black Sea the ability to disable a submarine. The same platform that approaches on the surface, that launches interceptors into the air, that engages fast boats with direct fire, has a track record against submarines. Iran's naval commanders have spent years building an asymmetric doctrine designed to threaten conventional surface fleets. What's coming to the strait is not a conventional surface fleet. It's a distributed, autonomous, multi-domain capable system that is specifically designed to operate in exactly the kind of cluttered, complex, threat-dense environment that the strait represents. The IRGC built its doctrine against one kind of adversary. It's about to face a completely different kind. Here's the proof that this isn't theoretical. Ukraine has already done this, not in the Strait of Hormuz in the Black Sea, against Russian naval forces that are significantly more capable than anything the IRGC operates in the Gulf. The Black Sea Fleet of Russia was one of the most significant naval forces in the region. Modern frigates, submarines, missile cruisers, including the Moskva, the flagship, support vessels, and landing craft. By March 2024, a third of that fleet had been destroyed or rendered combat ineffective, not by the Ukrainian Navy. Ukraine's surface fleet was effectively non-existent by naval drones, by the same Magura-class platforms and their predecessors that are now heading to the Gulf. The Moskva, Russia's Black Sea Fleet flagship, sunk by Neptune missiles used in conjunction with drone targeting and distraction. The Kerch Bridge, the critical logistics link between mainland Russia and occupied Crimea, struck by naval drones, a Russian submarine disabled in its berth by a naval drone operation. Russian warships pushed from Crimea's ports to Novorossiysk, and then becoming so afraid to leave port that Russia's naval blockade of Ukrainian shipping essentially collapsed. A country with no traditional navy achieved all of that with drones in a confined, heavily defended waterway environment. The Strait of Hormuz is different from the Black Sea in its geography and its specific threat profile, but the fundamental challenge is the same: a conventionally superior power trying to use asymmetric tactics to control a maritime choke point. Ukraine solved that problem in the Black Sea. It's bringing the solution to the Gulf. Here's the wrinkle. The United States is not part of the summit where Zelenskyy dropped his hint, was not involved in the conference where the Strait security framework is being built among 35 nations. And there's a reason for that. America has its own blockade running of Iranian ports. The strategy that Trump announced that is costing Iran $500 million per day, that Trump has said he has no intention of lifting until a deal is reached. The American blockade and the Strait opening effort are not perfectly aligned strategies. Ukraine experienced this directly. In early March, Zelenskyy publicly stated that the U.S. had asked for Ukraine's help in dealing with Iranian Shahed drones. He offered to provide interceptor drones and expertise in exchange for Patriot air defense systems. Trump initially seemed open, said he would take assistance from any country. 11 days later, The Independent reported that the U.S. had snubbed Ukraine's offer, declined the drone technology exchange. Ukraine went around the rejection. The decade-long deals with Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. Those deals don't require American approval. They are sovereign bilateral agreements between Ukraine and Gulf states that have their own security needs and their own relationships with Washington. Ukraine isn't chasing American approval. It's bypassing the need for it. Zelenskyy said it directly at the summit. If the U.S. doesn't want Ukraine's help in the Strait, Ukraine won't chase. It will bypass. The bypass is already happening. The deals are signed. The experts are deployed. The drones are coming. And the U.S., which simultaneously wants the Strait reopened and wants to maintain its own strategic control of the solution, is watching Ukraine create facts on the ground that complicate both objectives. This is Zelenskyy operating at a level of strategic sophistication that his country's situation 3 years ago would have made unimaginable. He's not asking permission. He's building partnerships, and the partnerships are now too significant to be derailed by American ambivalence. Here's the piece that tells you how real this already is. Over 200 Ukrainian drone experts are already operating in the Gulf region, not advisors sitting in hotel rooms writing reports. Operators, engineers, tacticians, people who have spent years under combat conditions in Ukraine, developing the expertise to operate drone systems against a sophisticated adversary's electronic warfare, air defense, and counter-drone capabilities. And according to Zelenskyy, those 200-plus experts are already directly intercepting Iranian Shaheds, not training Gulf state personnel to intercept Shaheds, not advising Gulf state personnel, directly operating systems against live Iranian drone threats. Ukraine is already in kinetic contact with Iranian air assets in the Gulf region. That fact, which has received almost no coverage in Western media, tells you that the transition from expert deployment to naval drone deployment is not a conceptual leap. The infrastructure is there. The relationships are there. The operational experience is there. The command and control integration with Gulf state military structures is being built in real time by the 200 people who are already doing it. When the Magura drones arrive, and they are arriving, they're not arriving into an unfamiliar operational environment requiring months of setup. They're arriving into an environment where Ukrainian operators already understand the threat picture, have worked alongside Gulf state military personnel, have identified the specific gaps in Hormuz defenses that the naval drones are designed to fill. This is not a deployment that starts from zero. It starts from 200 experts, months of operational experience, 3 signed 10-year deals, and 11 additional countries requesting the same arrangement. Let's put ourselves in the position of an IRGC naval commander this week. You've spent years building an asymmetric strait strategy, fast boats that can swarm conventional warships, shayads that can overwhelm point defense systems, mines that create permanent uncertainty for commercial shipping, submarines that can threaten surface vessels from below. Your entire strategy is calibrated against conventional adversaries, against the U.S. Navy destroyers that you know you can't fight directly, against Israeli naval forces, against the Gulf states' conventional surface fleets. You've never planned for this. An autonomous, unmanned system that can match your fast boats for speed, that can launch aerial interceptors from the sea surface to defeat your sheaths, that carries enough explosive payload to destroy your vessels, that has a combat track record against naval forces significantly more capable than yours. That is deployed not by a great power,